Forest bases. I've seen some good ones and I've seen some bad ones. Here's a bad one that's come off my table. It's a piece of 3mm MDF, cut, chamfered, painted poorly in a brown colour. Stick your toilet roll tree on there and you're all done. How do you feel about that for suspension of reality? Well, I didn't think it was too good, so when Dan and I were last playing games and setting up for our latest battle report, I decided about 2 days before he arrived that I'd better improve my tree situation. So this is what I came up with. So some good quality trees based on washers. So little washers there, in fact it's a 12mm and a 10mm. So they're nice and bottom heavy, so they're not going to fall over certainly as easily as they otherwise would be if they're just on plastic bases. And then this is the base that I've created. Just some flock, couple different types of flock, and some Rex's patented driveway gravel there, a couple of larger stones. And I think all in all, the effect of that significantly improves on your basic toilet roll tree and a brown base. Added to that, I actually have a stack of gravel type stuff, and once you start scattering the gravel around here, obviously not as effective on a blue gaming mat. Once you start scattering that around, and perhaps with a few fines as well, really find that that's going to blend nicely into the gaming mat and give you a really nice experience on the table. You can imagine your guys going through there, going into ambush, stalking out the opposition, and I'm sure this the holy tree bases is not new to anybody, but the idea is you pull this off and then you can have access to that for moving tanks through or moving men through. I don't like those brown holes, so what I've done, and I haven't completed these yet, is I've got some little placeholders which will have just a flock there, and there's a tree with a little bit of gravel around it. So once finished, we'll be able to swap those out, and then my photos will look quite nice, even when the trees are in and when the trees are out. So let's have a look at how those were created. Okay, so to get started, first thing we're going to need is some MDF, medium density fiberboard, and here we have a piece 3mm thick, and you'll notice that this one's already been pre-used for other parts of the project, but basically what you do is just get a pencil, sketch out a rough kind of kidney shaped space for your design, and then cut that out with a jigsaw, being careful to look after yourself and not cut off your little fingers. So cut that out with a jigsaw, you end up with a piece pretty much like that. Don't worry about finishing the edges at this point. You've just got a basic piece cut out in the shape of a kidney shape. So now we're going to make this with 2 layers. I'll show you the finished product here. So as you can see in the finished product, we have the 2 layers to accommodate. It's got to be a washer that sits down in there, and to achieve that, what we do is we glue 2 pieces of 3mm MDF together, and then before we do that, we cut out the slots here. with your hole saw to the correct size to allow for the washer to go in there. So the two pieces, one slightly bigger than the other, so once you've cut out your first piece, just lay it back down on another blank sheet and just go around about 10-15 millimeters on the outside, and that then gives you a second piece, making sure to cut on the correct lines. That then gives you a second piece which you're going to sandwich together. So again, cutting around this with a jigsaw, wear a mask when you're working with this stuff, and be careful of your fingers. So then we end up with two pieces, which I've gone ahead and completed these, so I don't actually have one to show you, but the two pieces are essentially exactly the same as what you see here, sandwiched together. Before you sandwich them together, you'll be wanting a hole saw. So to grab a hole saw the same size as or slightly larger than your washer, whatever washer that you're going to use, that will form the base of the tree, and that will sit down to the slot to hold the thing in place. So work out what washers you're going to need. Go and buy these ones are galvanized. They're a little bit more expensive, but they won't rust, and also they're a little bit more grippy on top, so they'll take filler or paint a little bit better than what a normal mild steel washer will. So once you have your first piece, assuming this is the first piece, just get going with your hole saw and just drill some holes at appropriate spots. Just make sure that you allow for two trees to stand next to each other. So obviously if you're putting them right next to each other, they're not going to sit properly. So just allow them in a reasonable period apart, and then essentially you want this is going to form the tree line or the leaf line, the drip line to be exact, and then so that's where that base would go. Another one here just to form that drip line for that tree, and then a third one there, maybe one in the middle, remembering that you can always just use an extra piece if you decide you don't like it. So drill the holes in that one and then glue them together. Now I just used Max Bond is what we have here in Australia. It's just a glue gun type of thing for the construction industry, very, very cheap. You can use PVA if you like, it takes a little bit longer to go off and perhaps not as strong, but that's what I used. Then the next step is get your grinder. Now I have a metal grinder here, but I found this worked perfectly just with the metal pad. And basically what you do is you just go around the edge, watch out for your fingers, go around the edge and just chamfer that off to give it a nice interesting shape. Make sure you don't encroach on the actual place where the washer is going to be. I also went into these areas here, possibly can't see it on the video, but it's actually chamfered into there and into there, just to break up the area and make it a little bit more interesting. This will all be covered with flock anyway, so you won't particularly see any of these things. Now the next step is just a trusty PVA glue, and with your finger, as I find the easiest, we're just going to go around and just blend in that little gap there between the two pieces of MDF. We don't need that much, just to essentially stick those two together, so that you don't have any flappy pieces, and just gives you plenty of strength with that. So you don't need much PVA. And realistically you could probably skip this step as well, although I do like the idea of the PVA on the rough surface that we've made with the grinder, just to bind that all together, and also it'll help the paint from soaking in too badly into that area. As you know, painting PVA can be a bit of a pain, so that was my strategy for that. Right, next step, we just put this to the side for the moment. As you can see on this one, it depends on what type of terrain you're making. As you can see on this one, I have some little rocky areas just for interest, just to make it as difficult as possible to get the miniatures to stand up on there. But for interest, I've added those little bits in there, a small rock as well. So that is the next step before you go any further, to get those glued in. So that's a starting point anyway for our terrain project. And part 2, I'll move on to all the next steps. But for now, you'll see that I have a good number of bases, some finished, some in progress, and this should certainly be enough for any table that's going to be forested. And if you can get a good clean line of sight through all of these, once they're on a 6x4 table, I will think you're doing better than me. Right, that's it for part 1. Join me back at part 2, where I'll talk about gluing these down and then the flocking. I have a bit of a method for flocking, and I'll tell you about the types of flock that I use as well. And then your terrain bases will be looking like mine. Thanks very much. See you soon.